The Duke of Ellesmere had not expected to be undone by a child in a village churchyard, and yet there he stood, unable to move, staring at a small boy of perhaps 4 years old, who had his own gray eyes looking back at him out of a stranger's face. He had come to Wetherby St. Mary on estate business, nothing more, a matter of a disputed boundary, an afternoon's tedium, and he had stopped in the churchyard only to wait out a shower under the lich gate, and the boy had been there, playing among the old stones with a wooden horse, a bright, grave, dark-haired child in a patched but clean coat, and he had looked up at the tall stranger sheltering from the rain, and the Duke of Ellesmere had felt the ground move under him. Because the child's eyes were not a child's ordinary eyes. They were a very particular gray, a pale, clear, storm cloud gray, ringed with a darker edge, and they were the Ellesmere eyes, the eyes that looked out of every portrait in the long gallery at Ellesmere Court, the eyes the Duke saw in his own shaving glass every morning, the eyes that had been in his family for 300 years, and were, everyone said, unmistakable. The child had his eyes. The Duke told himself it was coincidence. Gray eyes were not so very rare. He told himself this firmly, and did not believe it for a moment, because it was not merely the color, it was the exact shade, the exact dark ring, the exact set of them, and more than that, it was the way the boy looked at him, grave and steady and unafraid, tilting his head in a manner the Duke had seen 1,000 times in the mirror. He knew that head tilt. He had made it his whole life, and he stood under the Licket Gate in the falling rain and looked at a peasant child with the Ellesmere eyes and the Ellesmere head tilt, and a terrible, impossible suspicion rose in him that he could not put into words, because he did not yet dare. "Timothy," a woman's voice from across the churchyard, sharp with the particular fear of a mother who has looked up and found her child talking to a strange gentleman. "Timothy, come here to me, now, love." And a woman came hurrying between the graves, a young woman in the plain dark dress of a village schoolmistress or a parson's helper, her face hidden for a moment by the hood she put up against the rain, and she reached the boy and took his hand and drew him back protectively against her skirts, and then she looked up at the sheltering stranger to beg his pardon for the child's boldness. And the hood fell back, and the Duke of Ellesmere looked into the face of the woman he had married 5 years ago, and lost, and mourned, and never stopped loving, and the whole world stopped. "Eleanor," he said. It came out of him in a whisper, a broken thing. Eleanor Ward. His wife of 11 days, 5 years ago, before it had all been torn apart. Eleanor, whom he had married in secret and in defiance, whom his family had destroyed, whom he had believed, had signed the annulment, and taken his money, and vanished out of his life forever, because she had never really loved him at all. Eleanor, standing in a village churchyard in a schoolmistress's dress, with her hand on the shoulder of a 4-year-old boy who had the Ellesmere eyes. He watched the blood drain from her face. He watched her understand, in the space of a heartbeat, that the thing she had spent 5 years ensuring would never happen had just happened. That of all the men in England, to shelter under this particular lich gate, on this particular afternoon, it was him, the boy's father, who had never known the boy existed. "Julian," Eleanor breathed, and then, instantly, fiercely, gathering the child closer. "No, you will not." She stopped. She had gone from white to a kind of desperate resolve. "We are leaving. Timothy, come. We are going home. Now." "Eleanor." The Duke of Ellesmere stepped out from under the Lich Gate into the rain, because she was trying to flee and he could not let her vanish a second time. Not now. Not with those gray eyes looking up at him. "Eleanor, wait, please. That child," his voice cracked entirely. "Eleanor, whose child is that?" And Eleanor Ward looked at the husband she had loved and lost and protected for 5 years, from the truth she had carried away with her. And she understood that the protecting was over, that there was no lie that would survive the boy's own face, that the gray eyes had betrayed the secret she had guarded with the whole of her life. And she did the only thing left to her, which was to lift her chin, exactly as she had lifted it the day his family had destroyed her, and tell him the truth. "He is mine," she said, "and you know whose else, Julian, because he has your eyes, and you have seen them." and there is no use my lying, though God knows I would, if I thought you'd believe me. His name is Timothy. He is 4 years old. And yes, he is yours. He has always been yours. I have raised him for 5 years, believing you would never know, believing it was better so, and I would have gone on believing it to the end of my life, if you had sheltered under any other gate in England. But you did not. So now you know. And I am asking you, I am begging you, on whatever love you ever bore me, do not take him from me. That is the only thing I have to say to you. Whatever else you do, whatever the law allows a duke to do, whatever your family will demand once they know an Ellesmere heir is growing up in a village, do not take my son. He is all I have. I gave up everything else to keep him. Do not take him too. And the Duke of Ellesmere stood in the rain in a village churchyard, looking at the wife he had mourned for 5 years, and the son he had not known he had, and could not speak, because the whole of his life had just been revealed to be built on a lie, and he did not yet know whose. The truth, when it came out slowly, over the course of that shattering afternoon, in the small, clean parlor of the cottage where Eleanor lived, and kept the village school, and every piece of it was a knife. For the Duke of Ellesmere had been told, 5 years ago, a story, and he had believed it, because he had been 22 and heartbroken, and his family had been very convincing. He had married Eleanor Ward in secret, a parson's daughter, poor, beneath him, but clever and kind, and the great love of his young life, and his family had discovered it, and had been coldly, implacably opposed, and had moved to have the hasty marriage annulled on a technicality of consent and residence. And then, in the midst of that battle, he had been shown evidence, letters, a signed statement, the testimony of his own trusted uncle, that Eleanor had never loved him at all, that she had married him for his rank, that upon discovering the marriage would be annulled, and no fortune would come to her, she had agreed to sign the annulment in exchange for a settlement of £2,000, that she had taken the money and gone without a backward glance, proving herself exactly the fortune hunter his family had warned him she was. He had been shown her signature on the annulment. He had been shown the receipt for the £2,000, and he had believed it, had believed that the woman he loved had sold him and their marriage for £2,000, and it had broken something in him that had never healed, and had made him, over 5 bitter years, into the cold and guarded man the world now knew, a man who had loved once, been betrayed, and sworn never to be such a fool again. None of it was true. Eleanor told him the truth in the small parlor, with Timothy sent out to the neighbors so that he would not hear, and the Duke of Ellesmere listened to it with a growing horror that aged him 10 years in an afternoon. She had not taken the money. She had never seen £2,000 in her life. The settlement had been a fiction, the receipt a forgery. She had signed the annulment, yes, but not for money, and not willingly. She had signed it because his family had come to her, while Julian was away, and had told her a story of their own, that Julian had come to regret the marriage, that he wished to be free of her, but was too honorable to say so, that if she truly loved him, she would release him by signing the annulment and disappearing, sparing him the shame and the ruin his family assured her the marriage would bring down on him. They had been very convincing. They had shown her, too, forged evidence, a letter in a hand very like Julian's, expressing his regret, his wish to be free, and Eleanor, 19 and poor and terrified, and loving him with her whole heart, had believed that the kindest thing she could do for the man she loved was to let him go, and so she had signed, and refused the settlement they tried to press on her because she would not sell what she was giving freely, and vanished, believing she was setting Julian free from a marriage he regretted. Each family had told each spouse the same lie about the other, that the beloved wished to be free, and each of them, loving the other, had believed it, and let go, to spare the other pain. And Julian's family had forged the evidence on both sides to make certain the annulment held, and the two of them never spoke again to compare stories, because if they had spoken, even once, the whole lie would have collapsed in an instant, as it was collapsing now, 5 years too late, in a village parlor. And then, Eleanor said very low, 3 weeks after I signed and left, I discovered I was carrying your child, and I did not tell you. I have asked myself every day for 5 years whether I was right, and I still do not know. But I believed you had wanted to be free of me. I believed your family, that the marriage had been a disaster you regretted. And I thought, if I go to him now, carrying his child, I am not giving him back his freedom. I am chaining him to me forever, dragging him into exactly the ruin I signed the annulment to spare him. A duke with a secret annulled wife and a child. I thought it would destroy you, and your family would destroy the child. Take it from me, raise it as an inconvenient byblow, and I would lose everything and gain nothing and ruin the man I loved into the bargain. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I disappeared completely. I changed my name. I came to a village where no one knew me, and I said I was a widow, and I had my son, and I raised him, and I kept him safe and hidden and loved, and I built a small good life out of nothing, teaching other people's children so I could feed my own. And I never told you, because I believed to the bottom of my soul that you did not want us, that you had signed me away, that the kindest and safest thing was to let you believe I was a fortune hunter who had gone, rather than a wife who was carrying your child. I protected you from us, Julian, for 5 years, because I loved you, and I thought that was what love required. Her voice broke at last. And it was all a lie, wasn't it? Your family lied to me, and lied to you, and I can see it in your face. You never regretted me at all. You believed I sold you for £2,000, and I believed you wanted to be free. And they made us both believe it, so that we would never speak. And it worked. It worked for 5 years. And there is a little boy in the next cottage who has grown up without a father, because 2 young people who loved each other were each told a lie, and were each too loving to make the other stay. Oh God, Julian, what did they do to us? What did they do? The Duke of Ellesmere did not answer her question. What did they do to us? Because he could not. Because the answer was too large and too terrible, and he was still, that afternoon, only beginning to grasp its shape. But he did the one thing that mattered most, the thing that told Eleanor, more than any words could have, that the man she had married was still there, under the 5 years of cold. He answered her first fear, before her second. I am not going to take him from you, he said. His voice was not steady. Look at me, Eleanor. Hear me. Whatever else happens, whatever I do about my family, whatever the law says, whatever the world makes of this, I give you my word, on my son's gray eyes, that I will never take Timothy from his mother. Never. You have raised him alone for 5 years, in poverty, by your own labor, hidden and safe and loved. And you did it believing you were protecting me. And I will cut off my own hand before I repay that, by tearing him from you. Put that fear down. It is the one thing you never have to fear from me. I did not come here to take your son. I did not even know I had a son until an hour ago. I came to shelter from the rain, and I found the whole of everything I lost, everything they told me I never had, standing in a churchyard with a wooden horse. He put his face in his hands for a moment, and when he lowered them, his eyes, the gray eyes, Timothy's eyes, were wet. 5 years, Eleanor. They told me you sold me for £2,000. They showed me your signature and a forged receipt, and my own uncle swore to it, and I believed it. God forgive me. I believed you had never loved me, and I have spent 5 years hating you and hating myself for having loved a woman who could sell me. And the whole time, you were raising my son alone in a village, teaching school to feed him, because they told you I wanted to be free. We have been robbed, Eleanor. Both of us. Of each other and of 5 years. And I of my son's whole infancy. Every first word and first step. All of it. Gone. Stolen by people who called it protecting the family. I will never forgive it. But that is for later. For now. For now there is only one thing I want. And I am afraid to ask it. And I am going to ask it anyway. He drew a breath. May I meet him? Properly? Not as a stranger under a lechgate, as... I do not even know what I may be to him yet. We will have to go slowly. He must not be frightened or confused. But may I meet my son, Eleanor? Please. I have 5 years to make up, and I should like to begin, if you will let me, this afternoon. And Eleanor Ward, who had braced for a duke to arrive and take her child by force, found herself instead facing a broken man, asking permission to meet his own son, and the fortress she had built around herself and Timothy for 5 years, cracked straight down the middle, because this was not the cold duke she had feared. This was Julian, her Julian, from before, the young man she had loved, buried under 5 years of a grief that had been manufactured by the same people who had manufactured hers. "You may meet him," she said, unsteadily. "Of course you may. He is, Julian. He is such a good boy. He is grave and clever and kind, and he asks 1,000 questions, and he has your exact way of tilting his head when he is thinking. I see you in him 100 times a day, and it has been the sweetness and the grief of my whole life. But you must go slowly. You must let me tell him you are a friend, at first, a kind gentleman, until we know, until we understand what any of this is to be. He has always known his father was. I told him his father was a good man who could not be with us. I would not let him think himself unwanted. So he has a father in his mind already, a kind absent one. We must be careful how the one in his mind meets the one in the room." She wiped her eyes. Come and meet Timothy. But Julian, gently. He is 4. He is the whole of my heart. Be gentle with him." "I will be gentle with him," the Duke of Ellesmere said, "for the rest of my life. I promise you that too." The meeting of the Duke of Ellesmere and his son was a small, quiet thing, and it was the largest thing that had ever happened to either of them. Eleanor brought Timothy back from the neighbors and told him, carefully, that this was a kind gentleman called Mr. She nearly said a false name and then could not, and said instead, a kind gentleman named Julian, who had known his mama a long time ago, and who liked wooden horses very much, and would like to see his. And Timothy, grave and unafraid, had studied the tall stranger with his own gray eyes, and had decided, with the swift, unaccountable judgment of small children, that this one was safe, and had fetched his wooden horse, and shown it to the Duke of Ellesmere, with the intense seriousness of a 4-year-old, displaying his dearest possession, and the Duke had knelt on the cottage floor in his fine coat, and admired the horse as though it were the crown jewels, and asked its name, and been told it was called Duke, which nearly finished him entirely. "Duke is a very fine name for a horse," the Duke of Ellesmere managed. "Mama chose it," Timothy said. "She said it was a grand name for a grand horse. Do you have a horse?" "I have several," said the Duke. "As grand as Duke?" "Not nearly," said the Duke of Ellesmere, with perfect gravity, and Timothy nodded, satisfied. And the Duke of Ellesmere spent the next hour on the floor of a village cottage learning his son, learning that Timothy could count to 100, and knew his letters, and could name every bird in the hedgerow, that he was frightened of the dark and pretended not to be, that he loved his mother with the fierce whole heart of a child who has only one parent and knows it, that he was, in short, exactly the grave, clever, kind boy Eleanor had said, and that he had, unmistakably and heartbreakingly, the Ellesmere eyes and the Ellesmere head tilt and 100 small gestures the Duke recognized from his own childhood and his own mirror. It was his son, there was no possible doubt, and the Duke of Ellesmere, kneeling on the floor playing horses with the child he had not known existed until that afternoon, fell in love with his own son so completely and so instantly that he understood he would burn down the whole of Ellesmere Court, and everyone in it who had kept this from him, and count it cheap. That evening, after Timothy was abed, the Duke and Eleanor sat again in the small parlor, and the reckoning began in earnest. "I have to tell you what I am going to do," the Duke said, "because it concerns you and Timothy, and I will never again make a decision about your lives without you. That is over, the deciding for you, both my family's version and your own. From this day we decide together or not at all." He leaned forward. "First, my family. The annulment was obtained by fraud, forged evidence, false testimony, a forged receipt, my uncle's perjury. I have contacts enough in the law to know that an annulment, procured by fraud, can be challenged, and I intend to challenge it, and to have the fraud exposed, and to see my uncle answer for what he did, not for revenge. Eleanor, though God knows I want revenge, but because our marriage was real, and it was destroyed by a lie, and I want it restored in truth, so that our son is not so that Timothy is what he is, which is my lawful true-born son and the heir to Ellesmere, and no one can ever call him anything less. Second, you. And this is the part I am afraid of, because I have no right to it, and you have every right to refuse. 5 years ago I married you because I loved you more than anything in the world, and I have never stopped, not through all the years I believed you had betrayed me. I hated you and loved you at once, which is its own kind of hell. And now I know you never betrayed me at all, that you loved me so much you gave me up to spare me a ruin that was itself a lie. So the love was never the thing that failed us. The love was the one true thing in the whole disaster. It was only the lies around it that failed. And I find I am sitting in your parlor wanting, more than I have ever wanted anything, to have it back. You, and Timothy, and the marriage they stole, and the family we should have had for 5 years and did not. But I am not going to press you. You have built a life here. A good one, your own, out of nothing, by your own strength, and you owe me nothing, and you have every reason in the world not to trust the family that destroyed you, or the man who believed you capable of selling him. So I am going to ask you nothing tonight except this. May I come back? May I court my own wife, slowly, and be a father to my son, and prove to you over whatever time it takes that I am still the man you married, and not the cold fool 5 years of lies made of me, and let you decide, freely, with no pressure and no hurry, whether there is anything left of us worth restoring? That is all I ask tonight. Not that you take me back, only that you let me try to earn it. That night, riding the long, dark road back to his inn, the Duke of Ellesmere remembered the whole of it. The thing he had spent 5 years forcing himself not to remember, because remembering had been agony when he believed it had all been a lie. He remembered how they had met, he a young man of 22, down from Oxford, restless and privileged and secretly starved for something real. She, the parson's daughter, in a village near one of his father's smaller estates, 19, clever and laughing and entirely unimpressed by his rank, which no one in his life had ever been. He remembered the summer of it, the walks, the arguments about books, the way she had teased him for his grand manners and he had loved her for the teasing, because it was the first time anyone had treated him as a person rather than a prize. He remembered knowing, with the whole certainty of young love, that she was the one true thing in his gilded, empty life, and that he would rather have her in a cottage than any heiress in a palace. He remembered the marriage, hasty, secret, defiant, in a little church at dawn with 2 servants for witnesses, because he had known his family would forbid it, and had decided, in the arrogance and the glory of being 22 and in love, that he would present them with an accomplished fact and dare them to undo it. He remembered the 11 days after, the happiest of his life, the only truly happy days he could ever remember, the 2 of them hidden away in a borrowed cottage, married, laughing, planning the whole bright, impossible future. 11 days. That was all they had been given before his family found them. And then he remembered the darkness, being summoned home, being worked upon, being shown the evidence, her signature, the receipt, the letters, his uncle's grave, sorrowful testimony that the girl had been a fortune hunter all along and had taken £2,000 to sign the annulment and go. He remembered refusing to believe it at first, and then the evidence mounting, and Eleanor gone, actually gone, vanished without a word, which the family said proved everything, and which he now understood had been her own heartbroken flight, engineered by the same liars who had shown him the forgeries. He remembered the exact moment he had broken, sitting alone with the forged receipt in his hand, believing that the one real thing in his life had been a lie, that the woman he had loved more than his own name had sold him for £2,000, and how something in him had simply closed, that night, like a door in winter, and had stayed closed for 5 years, and had made him cold. They had taken his 11 days of happiness and poisoned even the memory of them, so that for 5 years he could not remember the borrowed cottage without the poison of believing it a performance. And now the poison was drawn. Now he knew the 11 days had been real, that her love had been real, that the only lie had been the one that separated them, and the memories came flooding back clean, unpoisoned, almost unbearable in their sweetness. She had loved him. She had always loved him. The happiest 11 days of his life had been exactly as happy and as true as they had felt, and he had spent 5 years believing them a fraud. And now he had them back, every one, and a son besides, and the woman herself, alive and good, and raising his child in a cottage 3 miles behind him in the dark. He stopped his horse on the dark road and put his face in his hands and wept for the 5 stolen years, and for the 11 true days given back, and for the gray-eyed boy asleep in a cottage who was the living proof that the one real thing in his life had been real after all. And then he rode on to his inn and did not sleep, and in the morning he began the work of winning back, by patience, what a lie had stolen by force. He came back. He came back every week that autumn, riding the long road to Wetherby St. Mary, not as a duke descending, but as a man courting, patiently, on the terms Eleanor set, at the pace Eleanor chose. He did not overwhelm her with his wealth or his consequence. He understood, better now than at 22, that these were the very things that had frightened her into signing the annulment, and he laid them aside. He came in plain clothes. He sat in her small parlor, and drank her weak tea, and helped Timothy with his letters. He learned to be, slowly, the father he had missed 5 years of being, and he was careful, always, gentle, letting the boy come to him at the boy's own speed, never forcing, so that Timothy's first fragile trust could grow into something real, rather than being crushed under a duke's impatience. And while he courted his wife in the village, he made war on his family in London. The exposure of the fraud was thorough, and it was merciless. The Duke of Ellesmere was no longer the heartbroken 22-year-old who could be managed. He was a powerful man of 27, with the full resources of his dukedom, and a cold, clear fury to drive them, and he turned all of it on the people who had stolen 5 years of his life. He found the forger. He found the clerk who had been bribed. He confronted his uncle, the trusted uncle who had perjured himself, who had forged the letters, who had told each young spouse that the other wished to be free, and he did it with proof so complete that the old man could not deny it, and the interview was, by all accounts, terrible. The uncle blustering about the good of the family, about the unsuitability of the match, about how it had all been done to protect the Ellesmere name from a fortune-hunting parson's daughter, and the Duke of Ellesmere answering, in a voice like the closing of a tomb, that the fortune-hunting parson's daughter had refused the £2,000 they tried to press on her, had asked for nothing, had given up a dukedom to spare a man she loved, and had raised the Ellesmere heir alone in poverty, rather than trouble the family that had destroyed her, and that she had, in short, more honor in her smallest finger than the whole scheming family possessed, and that the name they had defiled in protecting was not hers but their own. He did not ruin his uncle utterly, for the sake of the family name, and because Eleanor, when he told her his intentions, had counseled a mercy she had more right to withhold than anyone. Do not become them, Julian. They destroyed us to protect the family. Do not destroy the family to avenge us. Let it be enough that the truth is known, and the marriage restored, and Timothy secure. Revenge is another kind of chain. We have been chained enough. So the Duke contented himself with the truth made undeniable, the annulment overturned, his uncle stripped of all trust and influence, and quietly retired in disgrace to a distant property, and the restoration, full, legal, and public, of his marriage to Eleanor Ward, which had never, the courts now affirmed, been validly dissolved at all. They had been married the whole time, through all 5 years of grief and lies. In the eye of the law, once the fraud was undone, Eleanor had been the Duchess of Ellesmere, and Timothy, the true-born heir, and no one could ever say otherwise. But the legal restoration of the marriage was not the thing that mattered, and the Duke knew it. A marriage restored on paper is only paper. The thing that mattered was whether Eleanor would choose him, freely, truly, with her whole wary heart, and that could not be won in a courtroom. It had to be won in a small parlor, week by week, over weak tea, and it took the whole of that autumn and into the winter, because Eleanor had been hurt too badly to trust quickly, and the Duke, to his eternal credit, never once rushed her. There was one gray November afternoon that Eleanor kept, ever after, as the moment she began to let herself believe. The Duke had come, as he came every week, and it had been raining, and Timothy had been fretful and confined indoors, and the great Duke of Ellesmere had spent 2 solid hours on his hands and knees on the cottage floor being a horse, an actual horse, with Timothy on his back, cantering gravely around the small parlor and over the hearthrug and under the table, while the boy shrieked with a joy Eleanor had rarely heard from him, because a child raised by a single hard-working mother does not often have a grown man with nothing better to do than be a horse for a whole afternoon. And Eleanor had sat with her mending and watched the most feared man in England crawl around her parlor with her son on his back, his fine coat dusty, his dignity entirely abandoned, laughing, really laughing, the way she remembered him laughing at 22, before the world went cold, and she had felt something in her chest that she had kept locked for 5 years, begin, dangerously, to open. When Timothy had at last worn himself out and been put down for his nap, the Duke sat on the floor with his back against the settle, disheveled and winded and happy, and Eleanor said, before she could stop herself, "You would have been a wonderful father to him, all along, if they had let you. I used to torment myself with it, in the early years, imagining the father Timothy might have had, the one they stole from him, and I told myself I was being foolish, that I did not really know what kind of father you would have been. But I did know. I always knew. And here you are, being exactly the father I imagined, 5 years too late, on my parlor floor, and it is," her voice caught, "it is the sweetest and the most painful thing I have ever watched, because it is everything we lost, happening in front of me, and I do not know whether to laugh or weep." The Duke of Ellesmere was quiet a moment. "Then do both," he said gently. "I do, most days. I laugh with him, and I weep for the years, and I have stopped trying to choose between the two, because they are both true. Eleanor, I know I cannot give back the 5 years. I would give my whole fortune to, and it is the one thing all my money cannot buy, but I can give every year that is left. I have thought about it a great deal, on the long rides here. I cannot undo what was stolen, but I can refuse to let the thieves have one more day than they already took. Every week I do not come is a week they are still winning. Every hour I spend being a horse on your parlor floor is an hour I take back from them. That is how I have made it bearable, not by forgiving the theft, but by outliving it, by piling up so many good hours that the stolen ones are outnumbered. I mean to bury the 5 years under 50 good ones, Eleanor, if you and Timothy will let me. That is my whole ambition now. It is a better one than I had at 22. And Eleanor Ward, watching her husband sit dusty and happy on her floor, and speak of outliving a theft rather than avenging it, understood that the young man she had loved had not been destroyed after all, only buried, exactly as her own hope had been buried, and that both of them were, this gray November afternoon, coming slowly and disbelievingly back up into the light. She did not say it yet. She was not ready yet. The fear was still too deep. But she reached out, across the small, warm room, and rested her hand for a moment against his dusty shoulder, the first time she had touched him of her own will in 5 years, and the Duke of Ellesmere went very still beneath her hand, and did not reach for more, and let her give exactly what she was ready to give, and not one particle more. And that restraint, that patience, that refusal to grasp, was the very thing that finally began to melt the last of the ice around Eleanor's guarded heart. A man who had grasped would have frightened her back into her fortress. A man who held still beneath her tentative hand, and waited, and wanted nothing she was not ready to give. That man she could, at last, begin to trust. "Thank you," she said, "for being a horse. He will remember this afternoon his whole life. So will I." And she took her hand away, gently, and the Duke let her, and neither of them spoke of it, but the thing had begun, and they both knew it had begun, and the long, slow thaw of that autumn moved 1 degree closer to spring. It was Timothy, in the end, who opened the door, as the children in these stories so often do. For Timothy had grown, over the autumn, to love the kind gentleman named Julian, who came every week and helped with his letters, and admired his horse, and answered his 1,000 questions, and never, ever seemed to tire of him. And one December afternoon, sitting on Julian's knee by the fire, Timothy asked the question children ask, the one that cannot be deflected. "Julian, are you my papa? Mama said my papa was a good man who couldn't be with us. And you're a good man, and you're with us now. So are you him? I've been wondering. You have eyes like mine. Mama says my eyes are special. Yours are the same special. So I wondered if you might be my papa come back." The Duke of Ellesmere looked at Eleanor over the boy's dark head, and Eleanor, with tears standing in her eyes, and a small nod, giving permission, choosing, in that moment, more than she perhaps knew, said, softly, "You may tell him the truth, Julian. He has earned it, so have you." And the Duke of Ellesmere held his son, and told him, gently, that yes, he was his papa, come back at last, that he had been kept away by a great mistake and a great sadness, but that the mistake was mended now, and he was never going away again, not ever, and that Timothy had a papa who loved him more than all the grand horses in England. And Timothy, 4 years old, considered this news with the grave attention he gave to everything, and then wrapped his arms around his father's neck and said, "I knew it. I knew you were him. I'm glad you came back, Papa. Mama cried sometimes when she thought I was asleep. Now she won't have to." And the Duke of Ellesmere wept into his son's hair. And across the small parlor, Eleanor Ward wept too. And something that had been broken for 5 years, in all 3 of them, began at last to be whole. That night, after Timothy slept, Eleanor came to the Duke where he stood by the fire, and she made her choice, freely, at last. "I have been so afraid," she said, "all autumn, afraid to let myself believe it, afraid to trust you, afraid that if I opened my heart again, the whole thing would be torn apart a second time, and I would not survive it twice. I have made you court me for months, because I was too frightened to simply say what I have known since the day you knelt on my floor and admired a wooden horse. But I heard you tell our son you were never going away again, and I watched you weep into his hair, and I find I am not afraid anymore. Or rather, I am afraid, and I am going to choose you anyway, because I have learned that the frightening thing and the right thing are so often the same thing, and I gave you up once out of fear, dressed as love, and I will not do it again." She took his hands. "I never stopped loving you, Julian, not for one day of the 5 years. I loved you while I signed the annulment. I loved you every time I looked at our son's eyes. I have loved you the whole time, in secret, in grief, believing it was hopeless, and now it is not hopeless. Now it is real, and you are here, and Timothy has his father, and I am done being afraid of my own happiness. I choose you, freely, not because we are married on paper, not because of Timothy, not because you are a duke. I chose against your dukedom once and would again. I choose you because I love you, and I always have, and I am finally allowed to. Welcome home, Julian. Welcome home to both of us. We have been waiting for you for 5 years, and we did not even know we were allowed to hope you'd come." And the Duke of Ellesmere took his wife in his arms, his wife, restored in law and now in truth, chosen freely at last, and the family that a lie had shattered 5 years before was, in a small firelit parlor in a village, made whole. They did not stay in the village, but Eleanor would never let it be forgotten, and neither would the Duke. Wetherby St. Mary had sheltered her when she had nothing. Its people had been kind to the young widow and her grave, clever boy, and the Duke of Ellesmere endowed its little school and mended its cottages, and remembered, always, that it was the place where his son had grown up safe, while his father was kept away by a lie, and he never passed its lich gate, to the end of his life, without stopping, because it was the gate under which he had sheltered from a shower, and found, playing among the gravestones with a wooden horse, the whole of everything he had lost. Timothy grew up at Ellesmere Court, the true-born heir, adored, and if the grand house and the grand horses delighted him, they never quite eclipsed, in his affection, the wooden horse named Duke, which sat on his mantle his whole life, because his mother had carved it herself in a cold cottage when they had nothing, and it was, he understood as he grew older, the truest symbol of the thing that had made him, that he had been loved, fiercely and completely, by a mother who gave up a dukedom to keep him safe and hidden and warm, in the years before his father found his way home. And there were more children, in time, a whole warm nursery of them, the Ellesmere eyes looking out of a new generation. But Timothy was always, in a way the others understood without resentment, the special one, the first one, the one who had been the secret, the boy with his father's eyes, who had grown up in a churchyard village and been found under a lich-gate in the rain. Eleanor never forgot the first time Timothy was brought to Ellesmere Court and shown the long gallery. It was after the marriage was restored and the truth made public, and the Duke had wanted his son to see his inheritance, not the wealth of it, which meant nothing to a small boy, but the belonging of it, the proof written on the walls that he was where he was meant to be. And so the three of them walked the long gallery together, past 300 years of Ellesmere portraits, and the Duke lifted Timothy up before one and then another, and Timothy studied the painted faces with his grave attention, and then he said the thing that Eleanor carried in her heart the rest of her life. "Papa," he said, pointing from a portrait of some long-dead duke to his own face and back, "that man has my eyes, and that lady, and that one. They all have my eyes. Why do all the pictures have my eyes?" "Because they are your family," the Duke of Ellesmere said, holding his son before the portraits of his ancestors. "Every one of them. That is your great-great-grandfather, and that is his mother, and they lived in this house hundreds of years ago, and they all had the eyes you have, because it is our family's eyes, and it has come all the way down through all those years to you. You are the newest one, Timothy. The whole long line of them, all those gray eyes, all those years, they were all leading, though none of them knew it, to you. You are where they were all going." Timothy considered this, swinging his legs, held safe in his father's arms before the long, bright rank of his ancestors. "Did they know about me?" he asked. "The picture people, did they know I was coming?" "No," said the Duke, and his voice was not quite steady, and Eleanor saw him glance at her, and she understood he was thinking of the 5 years, of how nearly this boy had grown up never knowing any of it, a secret in a village, the heir who was almost lost. "No, they did not know you were coming. For a while, I did not know you were coming either, but you came anyway. And now you are here, where you belong, with all of them, and with me, and with your mama, and you will never have to wonder again whose eyes you have, or where you come from, or whether you belong. You belong here, Timothy. You always did. It only took us a little while to bring you home." And Timothy, satisfied, wriggled down and ran off to explore the gallery, his footsteps echoing in the great bright room where 300 years of gray eyes watched the newest of the line run laughing beneath them. And the Duke of Ellesmere put his arm around his wife, and the two of them stood and watched their son run through his inheritance, and neither of them could speak, because they were both thinking the same thing, how nearly this had not happened, how a shower of rain and a lich-gate and a wooden horse had given back a whole life that a lie had very nearly stolen forever, and how the gray eyes that had betrayed the secret in a churchyard had, in the end, only led the boy home. "They almost had him," Eleanor whispered. "Your family. They almost let him grow up never knowing any of this, never knowing you, never knowing he belonged anywhere but a rented cottage." "They almost did," the Duke agreed, his arm tightening around her. "And instead, he is running through his own gallery under the eyes of his ancestors, with both his parents watching. Home. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for a rainstorm, Eleanor, the single most fortunate shower of rain in the history of England. If the sky had been clear that afternoon, I would have ridden straight through Wetherby St. Mary and never stopped, and never seen his eyes, and lost the two of you forever, and never even known what I had lost." He drew a breath. "I do not believe in providence. I never have. But I find I cannot quite call it chance either. That of all the gates in England, I sheltered under that one, on that afternoon, and looked down, and saw my own eyes looking back at me. Perhaps some things are too important to be left entirely to chance. Perhaps the gray eyes were always going to find me, one way or another, because a thing that true cannot stay hidden forever. I do not know. I only know that I am the most fortunate man alive, and that I owe the whole of my happiness to a wooden horse and a rainstorm, and a little boy who looked up at a stranger without fear." "Eleanor," Duchess of Ellesmere, restored to the rank she had twice refused and now wore with a quiet, unassailable dignity, became known for one cause above all: the protection of women alone with children, the abandoned wives, and the vanished mothers, and the girls cast out to raise a child in secret. There was no such woman within her considerable reach that the Duchess of Ellesmere did not help, because she had been one, had raised a duke's son alone in a cottage, teaching school to feed him, believing herself unwanted, and she never forgot the cold of it, or the fear, or the particular loneliness of loving a child so much that you give up everything else in the world to keep him. And she spent her whole restored and happy life making certain that as many such women as she could reach were found, as she had been found, and brought in from the cold. "We lost 5 years," the Duke said to her once, late in their long life, watching their grandchildren play beneath the portraits with the Ellesmere eyes. "I have never entirely forgiven it. 5 years of Timothy's childhood, of your youth, of our life together, stolen by a lie. It is the one thing I cannot be at peace about, even now." "I know," said Eleanor, "but I have made my peace with it, and I will tell you how, so that perhaps you can make yours. The 5 years were stolen, yes, but not the love. They stole the years. They could not touch the love. I loved you the whole 5 years, and you loved me, even believing the worst. You told me so, that you hated me and loved me at once. So the love never stopped, Julian. It only went underground, like a river in a dry season, and ran on in the dark, in both of us, waiting. And then you sheltered from a shower, and it came back up into the light, exactly where it had gone under, not one drop of it lost. That is what they could not steal. They took our years, and they could not take our love, because love, real love, is the one thing in this world that a lie cannot destroy. It can only hide it for a while. 5 years. And the moment you saw his eyes, it was all still there. Every bit of it, as though no time had passed at all. That is not a thing to grieve, my love. That is a thing to marvel at. We were robbed of everything but the one thing that mattered, and the one thing that mattered turned out to be robbery-proof. I would rather have that. A love that survived 5 years of lies underground and came back whole, than an easy love that was never tested at all. Make your peace with it that way, Julian. We lost the years. We kept the thing the years were only ever the container for, and we got it all back, in a churchyard, in the rain, because a little boy looked up at a stranger with his father's eyes.